So the tracks that you're referring to, Joseph, are the Winton tracks. There's two lots of tracks that are well known up in that area. One's called the Lark Quarry Dinosaur tracks, which are about 100 kilometres in a southerly direction from Winton. The other one's only about 20 kilometres out of Winton at the Age of Dinosaurs Museum. The one at the Age of Dinosaurs Museum have actually been transported there. They found them in another location and they cut each slab out. It's quite an extensive sort of site that they've taken up to the museum, and I've got it in a big indoor building. I've got a picture there if you want it. There's the indoor museum at the Age of Dinosaurs Museum, and each part of that they've taken up there. Did you want me to go through some of the other slides?
Yeah, I think it's good to remind people that there's this kind of story that's being sold, even in professional museums, right? We're not just talking about local guides that actually sell a story that isn't true. So just run us down through that.
Well, this shows you how important they are to people, because they've literally built this building's purpose-built to house these tracks, which they've individually cut out in little bits and pieces and then re-put them together like a jigsaw puzzle. This is one of the dinosaur depictions that they find in these tracks, a big sauropod, and that's the tracks that they leave. A little bit like what Glenn was just sharing, actually, that they are toed creatures, but they leave these sorts of tracks, so they're not leaving specific toe marks. And there was other little dinosaurs going in different directions, and this is a footprint of one of them there, and that's a model depiction of those dinosaurs. So the sauropod, we have shared this in Creation Conversations when I went through my trip, but we'll just quickly recap that. So the big sauropods heading in that direction, the smaller ones are heading in the opposite direction, and they don't call it a stampede, unlike the Lark Quarry ones, which we'll get to just in a second, because the big sauropods is a herbivore, doesn't eat the other dinosaurs, so they don't regard it as a stampede. That little mark there seems innocuous. By the way, you can see all the little fragments of the stone there of where they've cut them and taken them up to be on site, because that's meant to save them weathering and wearing out so that people can't study them anymore. Well, that's a lungfish, and the guide said, well, it's just amazing. How do we know that they're lungfish 95 million years later? Because 95 million years later, lungfish are still making the same marks. So they haven't changed at all. And I think I'm correct, and I'm happy to be corrected by one of our esteemed colleagues here, but that's the turtle. There's turtles and crocodiles on site there, and I think that one was the turtle marks. So there's certainly been water involved, because you've got turtles, and you also had crocs there. This is the actual Lark Quarry one, the one that's about 100 or so kilometres south of Winton. And these ones are actually in situ. So they built the building around where the dinosaur tracks were found. And so you can see they've left the overlying sandstone layer there. That's so that in the future they can dig more back and find fresh tracks, which they're certain are under there. But the actual dinosaur tracks are on a mudstone layer underneath them. And in this case, it is called a stampede because you've got a three-toed carnosaur, they call it. But I think it's a bit like what Glenn was just saying. They can't be 100% certain, except they just fall back to the dinosaurs that have been found in the general region. In this case, it's a similar thing. Big dinosaur going one way, smaller ones going the other way. But the storytelling here is that it is a stampede because the carnosaur was clearly wanting to eat something, and these smaller dinosaurs were trying to get away from it. And I asked the guide, well, how do you know that? How can you be certain that that is what they were running from? And he said, well, you can't be, basically. Those big drag marks there are logs. And when we pressed him, he said, you can't be sure what they were running from. That's the storytelling. That's the selling of their product. They want people to travel that 100 kilometres out of Winton, which is a fairly remote location in Western Queensland anyway, to come to their attraction to help fund their research and fund other things that they're doing there. The drag marks, the crocs, the lungfish, turtles, they're all indications that water was involved. In fact, some experts say that these dinosaurs were actually swimming. They're actually reaching down with their feet to try and get to the ground.
There's been a rather groundbreaking paper that was published, effectively detailing the fact that these footprints are not showing small herbivores running away from large carnivores, but they're both actually herbivores, these dinosaurs that are represented there. And when John pressed the museum guide or owner director, they not only admitted that they knew about the paper and had read the paper, but the comment was, this story sells so well, right? People actually come and see it because you get the impression of the Jurassic Park, you know, great big giant dinosaur chasing the small ones, ripping them apart, carnage and all. But even aside from that story, you look at the actual evidence that you're seeing there, it paints a very different story to the one that they show of millions of years of slow evolution and slow burial, because you have land dinosaurs, you've got fish, right? Lungfish, even though they lungfish, which are still alive today, can sort of come out of the water for short periods of time and still survive. They are still marine creatures. They're still aquatic creatures. So you've got aquatic creatures, you've got terrestrial creatures, the dinosaurs, you've got logs, trees that have been ripped up and stripped of their branches and dragged along in flowing water. So you're clearly looking at very large flood evidence for sure, which doesn't really fit in with the story that they tell you. So it is worth challenging the story sometimes and taking a bit of a step back and going, well, what does the evidence actually show? It's a bit like the story with our feathered dinosaurs earlier, right? That flapped and scared the prey. Well, let's take a step back and actually find what's underlying the story. And the story is, well, it's all based off of some robots that were programmed to do it in the first place. So, you know, question as you go, basically.